Good morning. I've been battling a bit of flu, so I've had quite a few days of struggling with this thing. Anyway, today we are going to attack the building of the hanging knees. Very similar to the knees we've built before, except now we have the compound curve of the inside of the hull. So let's get right to it. This book is so beautifully illustrated. Even though some of the drawings and diagrams are given are not in scale, what I found is that if you actually photocopy them, they're almost exactly to scale. Perhaps the reason David didn't do that was because each boat is going to be slightly different, and maybe he didn't want to get you to make something that didn't quite fit. I made up my balsa blank, which fit perfectly on the model, and then compared it to the diagram in the boat, and it was identical. This is one of the better diagrams in the book. It leaves nothing to your imagination, and everything is crystal clear. So once you make up the blank and clean it up, this is what it came out like, and I thought it worked pretty well. So just a series of trial fits, and then we put it in place and stuck it with PVA. Uneventful. I think I only made one mistake and had to remake only one of them. So rather than go through each individual one, we just will quickly run through the installation of the various beams. They were very similar, no significant great challenges, just simply patience. And of course, the biggest problem when you stick a piece is you need to wait. If you're using PVA, you need to wait about at least an hour before you can stick another piece. And that's probably the biggest holdback in the productivity of getting more of these beams installed. So lots of sanding, cleaning up as I went along. Different techniques were used. I have to say I used the turbo carver quite a bit because it's very gentle when you're working on the model, and really a fantastic tool, and certainly came into its own this part of the build. I wish I could tell you that there was one particular technique that I ended up with in terms of installing the carlins and the ledges, but the truth is I would go back and forth. Each problem I found either a similar solution or a new solution. I actually made up a little saw from some very fine hacksaw blades that helped me to define the slots for putting the ledges in place, and use this quite often. It was much gentler on the model than using one of the utility knives. The only two glues I used was PVA, which probably 90% of all the pieces were stuck with PVA. And I did use CA, thick CA, when I had problems clamping, because in these very tight spaces, sometimes it's very difficult to be able to clamp the piece. So the process continued, and the process being stick the beam, then the lodging knee, then the carlins, and then the ledges, and that really proceeded almost unchanged right through until we came to beam 10. This morning we are looking at the installation of the opposed lodging knees, so the approach has to be different than how we use the lodging knees and the hanging knees. We've got them made up, and this would be the lodging knee, which would fit as per normal. But of course the other one has to go below it, and so we've actually adjusted it so that it'll fit at an angle. And to do this, we're going to have to stick the beam in which has been 10 in first. Then we'll stick the one that will pass below, and then finally the lodging knee that's on beam 9. And this is really where we made the change, because we had to use CA, as you're seeing here. There was simply absolutely no way to clamp and hold it in place. So I used thick CA and just held it with my finger probably for about 20 seconds. And that's sufficient to have put it in place. So some things you change, some things you leave the same. Some old things you discard, you bring back. It's really a process of learning and adopting. And the truth is, whatever works at the time is fine once it achieves the design objective. Which means that we've now stuck 6 through 10. So all we had left to do was the final cleanup with the Proxon sanders, and then the application of the termite fluid to make sure that none of those little beasties come and eat our hard work. Well, that was very interesting, lots of fun, lots of patience, and now we're going to go on to 11, 12, and 13, which has lots of interesting pieces in it, and it's much more complicated than the beams that we've installed so far. So we'll see you in the next video.